Welcome everybody to the MESPA PrincipalCast. I'm your host, Brett Domstrand, and I am the principal at Lake Marion Elementary in Lakeville, Minnesota. And we want to just say thanks for listening, everybody. It's been a while since we've had the podcast, but we are glad to be up and running, and we'll be releasing new episodes every 2 weeks. And so our welcome back guest is the only Gabe Hackett of Little Mountain Elementary in Monticello, Minnesota. Gabe, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Brett, thanks so much for having me. I am honored to be the welcome back guest to the MESPA podcast. I am a huge fan and a huge listener. So this is a big deal for me to be the welcome back guest.
Well, you know, and the funny thing is, I feel like there could be a funny line here where it's like, not only am I a client, I'm also the president.
That's exactly who I am.
Like, we're all MESPA here, right? And so, Gabe, just to kind of tell everybody a little bit about your experience, just share with us your elementary principal experience and kind of what led you to this spot.
Sure. Yep. Well, before I get started, Brett, I just wanted to say congratulations on being the National Distinguished Principal. That is, it's an amazing honor. It's well-deserved. And I certainly am grateful for your mentorship as well as your friendship. And I've learned a ton from you over the years. So congratulations on that huge award. I'm looking forward to celebrating with you in Chicago this summer if it gets to happen.
Oh, Gabe, thanks for saying that. And, you know, it's been a real honor, and I don't feel like I deserved it this year, especially with everything happening, but thank you for the kind words for sure.
Yeah, well, it's definitely deserved, and I know I'm not the only one that feels that way, so congratulations. Going into your question, my background, I started out as a Phi Ed teacher and really loved what I was doing, and what our dean of students at our elementary school at the time, she was going on maternity leave, and she said, you know, it'd be a lot easier for you to fill in since you know all the kids and have relationships versus me trying to find someone to do, you know, parts of my job. And so that's kind of how I jumped into leadership. And after I was in that dean of students role, another dean of students position came open the following year in the district I was working in, and I applied for it and got it. And so I worked as a dean of students for 5 years, and that was kind of my test into leadership. And as I was doing that, I went to get my administrative license. I'm kind of addicted to learning, so that was great for me to be able to go back to school too and have an excuse to do it. And after that, I was lucky enough to apply here in Monticello. It's only 6 miles down the road from my house, and I was offered the job and really excited to start my journey. And before I know it, I've been 8 years here at Little Mountain Elementary.
8 years.
Yeah.
So you've had quite the road then. So you had in essence, 6 years of practice principalship, because that dean position, it's kind of like do you like it? And if you do, here's a great chance of experience.
Right. It really is finding a way to get in. I know there are people, and I think maybe even your experience, Brett, was going from the classroom to the principalship, and that transition must be overwhelming to say the least, because I remember sitting in this principal chair on that first week of July when I was hired back in 2013 and thinking, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? I don't know how to do this job. You
know, it's funny you say that. So when I got my first principal job, a colleague you and I both know well, Brad Gustafson.
Yeah.
So I got 1 year of being a dean as well, but it was in a high school level. So I have had no teaching experience in elementary ever, and I had no leadership in elementary. So when I did get hired for this elementary position, my superintendent was so kind to say, "You've got the skills to do this." But I called Brad and said, "What do you do? Like, what do you start with?" And he said, "You know what? The first thing I did, I opened mail." Because I know how to open mail.
Yes. Yes.
That has always stuck with me of like, oh, right. Sometimes just do the things you know how to do, and then you'll figure the rest of the things out.
Exactly. You know, it's funny you bring up Dr. Gustafson, because Brad's kids were going to the elementary where I was a dean of students, and I knew him as a parent. I knew he was a principal, but I knew him much better as a parent. And so we had a friendship and that parent to the dean relationship but I never expected my phone to ring that first week in July. but it did. And when it did, it was Brad Gustafson on the other line saying, "Hey, I'm here for you. Whatever you need, let me know." And he's been such a great friend and a great mentor, just in throughout all of the years. But that first, you don't know what you don't know. And his advice was a lot the same. Just do what you do know how to do, whether it's opening mail or whatever that might be, and everything else will just come to you. And it did.
And I want to tap into something else that you mentioned. So you said that your principal tapped you on the shoulder and said, "I'm going to be gone, and I think that you've got the skills and the kids." What things had you been doing so far to build yourself into that leadership that she could say, "Gabe, I think you could do this"?
Yeah, well, I think just our specialists are such a valuable resource in that they know all of the kids. And I think that was a big part of it, is that, from the first graders to the fifth graders, I knew 95% of their names, and I had a relationship with them. And I think that was a big part of it. But also just the different programmings and activities that we would try to operate as Phi Ed teachers, where we were bringing in volunteers. So instead of your traditional track and field day where the kids are doing multiple events, we were bringing in parents to run the events for us. So a huge activity day, rather than you do an event and then you wait for your next event. We were just constantly moving, but we needed people to do that. So bringing in the families and making connections that way, I guess, is just one small example of how we were trying to involve more people and build those relationships.
So you got to be a dean. So that really was essentially your leadership buildup. So it made that transition probably pretty easy to becoming the principal. Had you always wanted to become a principal?
I had always thought about it, but I don't know that I would have taken the leap if I didn't have that tap on the shoulder to say, "Hey, I think this might be something you'd be good at." And I'm really thankful for that push, and for all the people that have helped me get to where I am today as the principal of Little Mountain Elementary. I don't have a day that goes by that I don't drive to work, look at the school, and think, this is overwhelming and exciting, and I'm very fortunate to be in the position that I'm in. So I guess I'm just really thankful that I had that push, because I liked what I was doing. I loved what I was doing. There are days I still would. Like today, I looked at my Phi Ed teachers out there. The kids are having a great time. They're in shorts and t-shirt, and that looked okay to me. I could go back and do that, but at the same time, I'm very fortunate to be in a leadership position and have what I hope is a positive impact on all the staff and kids here at Little Mountain.
Well, you have to believe that you do, because you're still there, right?
Right.
And it goes a little beyond that, because you have a pretty significant presence on Twitter.
Yep.
That doesn't happen by accident, but it doesn't happen overnight either. Tell us a little bit about, because I am a believer that I'll give a little background so you understand why I'm asking this question, is that Twitter opened my eyes back in 2011 or 12, whatever year it was that I got onto it. And my world expanded exponentially with the people that I got to know. And it's the reason why I got to become a principal, because I was noticed by my superintendent, which then added to some other things.
Sure.
Talk about your experience. What led you to try Twitter, and then to where you are now, where you use that as a foundational piece of your communication?
Absolutely. It's a good question. And I'm going to have to bring up our friend, Brad Gustafson again, because in one of those first conversations that we had, Brad said, "I'm going to encourage you to get on social media if you're not already, and here's how I use Twitter." I think at the time he was starting to use Instagram. "Here's how I use Facebook." We have a school Facebook page. And I just started asking questions about what that looks like. Do you worry about putting the wrong thing out on social media, or how do you engage? How do you get followers? How do you know? How do you connect with educators? How do you use it for professional development? And he was really there to help me get started and connect with others. As you know, the principalship can be kind of isolating at times.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard principals say that they wouldn't still be principals if they hadn't found a way to connect outside of their building or with other principals using social media. And I don't know that I would put myself in that boat necessarily, but it has been a game changer for me. And for all those reasons that I listed, not just because we get to tell our positive story with our families and all the families that follow us, but also for the learning and the professional development. It's all out there for us to go grab. And I think it would be really negligent of us not to go get that information and to participate that way. I don't think that I possess these unbelievable principal skills that help me do my job. So for me, I'm always looking for great ideas, and Twitter is a great place to grab those ideas from these principals that are doing amazing things across the country.
Right. And everyone, if you're still wondering whether you should get into Twitter, or if you think it's just politics that's on there, it really is. You get to cultivate it and make it what you want. You can find people that are strictly just talking about leadership and education, and you just follow those people. And if you get to people that you don't want to listen to, you just unfollow them. But when you start getting a lot of voices that make you realize you've got the skills, and then there are other people who are doing things where you go, I never thought of it this way. Twitter is a great place for you to go. And we could have been having this conversation 8 years ago, and we're still having it now because it is still that impactful for educators.
It really is. And it's kind of about taking that leap. I think I've engaged with so many educators that you could look at maybe their authors or speakers, or maybe they're national distinguished principals, and you're a little worried about taking that leap and saying, hey, I've got a question for you, or tell me about this blog post you've written. But once you take that leap and engage with those principals, you realize they want to learn from you just like you want to learn from them, and you have such great conversations. And I've met some of my great friends on Twitter, and some of them I've never met face to face. They're just my friends on Twitter, and I hope that I do meet them face to face at some point. But yeah, you can form some great friendships that way.
Oh, I'm telling you, it is powerful when you get to meet people for the first time, when you've engaged with them online for so long. And I went to NAESP in Spokane now 2 summers ago, and that was my first time ever going to a national conference. And to run into so many people, and you're like, I follow you on Twitter. I was going, I'm treating them like they're rock stars. And then I realized you're just like me. We're just normal people, just happy to be connecting with more people that we know. And it sure does make it, like you, I don't feel isolated as a principal, but there are times where it can feel isolating, and knowing that there are other people who have those same experiences makes the world feel a little less small, right?
It definitely does. It definitely does. And when you're able to grow those connections and throw out questions, you realize that other people are going through the exact same thing that you are, and that's helpful more than just about anything else could be.
I happen to notice on your walls, I see that poster of Kids Deserve It. I see a copy of the book in the background.
Yeah.
So are you a big fan of Kids Deserve It?
Oh, I'm a huge fan of Kids Deserve It. It's a book that it seemed like a book at the time that it was written, that it's what everybody was thinking, but nobody had put it into pages, and it wasn't like it was earth shattering and that we didn't, as principals, didn't hold those beliefs, but nobody had put it down on paper before. And it's a book that I read every year, and that I can read in one sitting, and still I'm pulling new things out of it to say, gosh, that's right. Schools aren't here for adults. They're here for kids. And we need to treat every single day as though as though we're going to make it the best experience for our kids as we possibly can.
Right. It's just, and so, Adam, welcome. And you've also, Todd Nesloni was one of our keynote speakers.
Yeah.
So you've had the opportunity to meet both of them too in person.
I have absolutely. And speaking of Twitter, that's how I connected with Adam. He was doing a keynote in Sauk Center with our friend Amy Millard up in Sauk Center. Yes. And so Adam, through Twitter, he's commenting on being in Sauk Center. So I sent him a message saying, hey, Monticello is about halfway between the airport and Sauk Center. So if you need to stretch your legs, I'd love to meet you. And we were just getting done with a school remodel. I was talking to a group of teachers. I turned around, it was during workshop week, and there's Adam Welcome standing in the hallway at Little Mountain Elementary. And that started a great friendship. And I was heavily into Kids Deserve It at that time. We were reading it not as a staff, but doing some different book studies. So I had the opportunity to take him around and meet the teachers. And a year later, he was our keynote for our district. And so another, to your point about Twitter, just how we've grown that relationship. And Adam Welcome is the kind of guy that doesn't just keynote. He's there for all of our staff. If they would reach out to him, he would be right there to say, hey, I can help with that. And he's become a great friend because of Twitter.
That's awesome. Now, does that mean, are you running a lot too then?
I try to run as much as I possibly can. I find that my knees need a break as I get older every once in a while, but I do try to run as much as I can.
I only say that because I'm not a runner. And when I read like the fit leaders and when I see Adam out running, and I'm just like, oh, there are some things that speak to me, and then there are some things that don't, and that's the one I struggle with. But
yeah,
he walks. I guess that's something. So now, obviously you read a lot.
Mm-hmm.
As you kind of think about being a leader and books or things that you've read that have influenced you, what are some things that you kind of go, yeah, this was a book at that moment, or this was a podcast I listened to, or this was something that really influenced my leadership? Can you share with us some experiences or some things that you think about when that question comes up?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I tend to think the best book is the one I'm reading at the time. I've gotten a lot better about how when there are people who are watching bad movies and they can't stop, they need to get to the end anyway. Yeah. I used to be that way with books, where I'd get about halfway through and it just wasn't resonating with me, but I'd finish that book no matter what. And then I found it would take me months to finish this book when I could have been reading something that I really enjoyed. And so I've gotten much better about, if it's not for me, it's just not for me, and I'll toss that away. And I do try to read books that are that talk about instructional delivery and get down to the nitty gritty about instructional practices. Mm-hmm. But the books that truly speak to me are philosophy books. Kids Deserve It, or even outside of education, Make Your Bed. Those types of leadership books that just are motivating. I find that they're page turners, and it inspires me to be better for kids. And I think that's why we're doing what we're doing.
It's so interesting. And the reason why I ask it is because sometimes I think, this is me personally, is I think that we get locked into, we must be reading educational books all the time, or we have to listen to educational podcasts. By the way, everyone, thank you for listening. But that sometimes it can be boxed in. And one of the most influential people in my life came from listening to Tim Ferriss. And Tim Ferriss, his original book was like the 4-Hour Work Week.
Yeah.
And then he came out with all these 4-hour different books. But his last book was something of Titans. I can't remember what it is, but basically he took every single one of the podcasts that he ever worked on and put that into a book and just took all the highlights. Well, I listen to his podcast and I go, wow, Seth Godin. All right, I'm not in the world that he's in, but that's a really good idea. And I know I could go and talk to this teacher and this teacher and this teacher, and it would just launch them into some free thinking. And so sometimes you never know what that book is going to be. So I appreciate that you say sometimes we grind it out to read something, but when you really find something that resonates with you, it does make a difference, right?
It does. Yep. And it makes me such a more prolific reader too, because when I'm into it, I'm through it in a week or two, and I can move on to that next book on the list. We've been reading as a district. We've done small book studies, but the idea is that we're going to get through all of the staff members in the entire district, whether it's paraprofessionals, administrators, teachers, Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. And that's been kind of a game changer for us. And although she mentions education several times throughout the book, I wouldn't call it an education book or a PD book. But boy, as far as being able to change culture and the way we communicate, it's a game changer.
Clear is kind.
Clear is kind. Yep.
Clear is kind. I mean, think about all the communication that we have to do as principals, right? We are the middle people in an organization. We have our superintendents and our cabinet, and we have our staff, whether it's our teachers, our paraprofessionals, our custodians. And in between here, we are always trying to communicate what's going on up here, what we want, and to make sure we're echoing the voices that we represent.
Yeah.
And when I read Clear is Kind, I thought about so many of my communications that, oh boy, when you read this, it reads like I'm really just talking to teachers. Even though it's a newsletter for everybody, there's nothing in here that's really saying custodians or support staff, and it changed the way that I message, because I think more about the audience and make sure that do they understand the where, what, how, and then is their feeling. Like, am I telling them how I'm feeling about something? And it changed the way, when you think about, if I'm clear with my communication and I'm giving everyone what they need, all the different personalities, that they don't ask as many questions. They don't get frustrated.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really proactive way to look at it. And I think it also helps the teachers or the staff, whoever they may be. I know it's helped for me when you're having a difficult conversation with a parent and the teacher's wondering how much to share. You're giving them the advice that clear is kind. It makes a difference in your mindset. Is this happening? Yes, it's happening. Do the parents deserve to know? Yes, they do. Okay, so we're going to tell them. We're going to give them all the information. And if they don't like it, just remember, clear is kind. You're being kind, whether they take it that way, whether, depending, they might not react the way that you want them to, but just remember, giving them all that information and being very clear about their student and their child is the kind thing to do. And when you shift that mindset, it makes a difference.
It's interesting, because that's when you're thinking about that, like, how do you deliver news that would be hard for you as a parent to take in, right? But we still have to be factual. We still want to share the information. Is that, as long as, another thing with Brene Brown is that vulnerability and love, and and so one of the things that we have really focused on in our meetings and talking with our teachers about when we're communicating difficult topics is to make sure that they know, I love your child very much, and I'm concerned, and these are the concerns I'm having because I love your child, and I don't have all the tools that I have, and so I'm looking to you, parent, that you might have something else that can help us.
Right.
And it kind of then starts wrapping up that, remember, it's a team approach. We're here together in this. I love Brene Brown. You're making me geek out right now.
No, that's for sure. I'm in the same boat. She's a hero around here.
Right. And everyone, don't forget, she's a researcher. She does research.
Yeah.
So it's not just touchy-feely. Brene Brown she is reading and researching and really looking at at evidence-based practices too. So it's not just the soft side. So if you're looking for something, Dare to Lead is any of her books, her TED Talks, any of them are worth it.
Yeah, definitely.
So kind of thinking about that. So as you go into, how many kids are in your building?
We have about 640, right around there.
Yeah, give or take. So now you do Good News, Call the Day. You promote students a lot. What have you learned from promoting students on social media? Because I know some people say to me, I would never put a picture of a kid on social media. I just don't feel comfortable with it. Yeah. And I try to say, well, as long as you're not writing here's Gabe in Mrs. H's 4th grade classroom, right. It's okay, because kids want to see that acknowledgement. Do you see this? Do you get the same results, or what's your experience been like? Yeah.
Going back to that first conversation with Dr. Gustafson, that's something that I asked him, do we have to worry about putting pictures of kids on social media or putting their name out there? And he kind of helped me navigate through that too. And maybe during your welcome back days or your open house, you let families know that this is how we operate, and you can opt out if you want to, but we want to share the positives that are happening. And I think that helps change the culture a little bit. And it really has. There was this stigma. I don't want to date myself, but there was a time when if you got sent to the principal's office, it meant that things weren't going well for you. And we've changed that culture where if you get called down to the principal's office, there's a pretty darn good chance that you're coming to hang out with Mr. Hackett. We're going to call your parents and celebrate the amazing things you're doing in class. And to me, that's what positive culture is all about. And it should be that way. You should be excited to come down and see the principal. And when we're on the phone and I'm making those good news phone calls, I try to work that into the conversation too. So, hey, Mrs. Peterson, we're going to take a selfie after we're done on the phone call here. Is it okay if I post this to Twitter? And we'd like to make so-and-so famous today. And usually the parents are absolutely, I can't wait to see it. And then you find out the parents are following you on Twitter, and then they're liking the next kids that get good news phone calls. And it just kind of escalates from there.
Yeah, it's like paying it forward in a whole different way.
Yeah.
And for the kids to now, are you do you do any type of PBIS or any type of school-wide support system for your kids?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I was dean of students and at my former school, we went through the training with Kurt Slater. He was doing the PBIS training, and so I've come from a PBIS school. We are not in name, but are following a lot of those, a lot of the directives that are placed by PBIS. The common language, just the different things that go along with being a PBIS school, collecting the data, the positive ratios, and everything else that I loved about the program. So although we're not a PBIS school yet, we're definitely using a lot of the things that make PBIS a great program.
Well, I just think like that good news call of the day falls right in line with it, right? Because you're talking about the values that we're trying to teach. And a sentence I say to parents a lot is like when we talk about a safe place for kids to make mistakes, that's why we have elementary schools. This is the place for kids to be citizens in training. And we want them to learn the hard lessons of life here, where we can help them safely land, give them feedback, let them retry and get better at it, rather than having to do that out in the community. And
yes.
I think that PBIS or whatever whatever people's systems are, is teaching that common language, teaching some common values, and really it goes back to that clear as kind, is embedding that in everything we do. And so now, so you and I are both LMEs.
Yes, yeah, we are.
So what are the characteristics of Little Mountain that the students are like, their pride or their whatever it might be that they're showing?
Yeah, so we use, as our common language, we use the Simple Six, and the first three are the ones that we use throughout the entire year. We usually take a month to really focus in on one and do different activities in the classroom. But the first three are just be here, be safe, and be honest. And when you think about those three, they really cover just about everything that we're trying to teach our kids, whether it be playground behavior or hallway behavior, classroom expectations. Are you trying your best because your teacher's asking you to give your best? Are you being kind to your friends on the playground? Are you telling the truth when you're asked a question? Just so many of those things that we can work into that common language and use be here, be safe, be honest, that it becomes part of the language that we can use, whether it's on the announcements, we're doing different skits or teaching events out there, or out on the playground, putting posters up so they see it a little more often, just that whole idea, that PBIS idea of that common language. And when students go outside those expectations and they're make a tough decision when they're coming in, just reinforcing with that language too, it makes a huge difference. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it does. It makes a huge difference when you're using that common language that they've heard so many times, and they know what they know which part of that common language didn't fit with their behavior, so that they're able to talk about it with you. And it's a really freeing conversation when you're having it, even with the first grader.
Well, and it's centering, because we're talking about the same common, like we both came from that same foundation, right? And so it does matter. And so you were talking about announcements. Gabe, the reason why I'm bringing up some of these topics is MESPA members, we've listened to your feedback, and we know that some of the things you want to learn about are what are the tips and tricks people are doing that I could maybe try in my own building. So I heard you mention announcements. So and you said skits, and I heard some of those kind of things. Talk a little bit about what you do then to teach the messaging for your kids.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. So if Brad Gustafson is listening to this, he's going to get sick of hearing his name. But when I started, they were still doing announcements the old school way through the telephone, so you hear the ding and everybody stops what they're doing. And we talk about lunch and we talk about any special events and go from there. But I wanted to do video announcements, and I knew Brad was doing video announcements. And so I went to visit at Greenwood Elementary, and he showed me the app that he was using and his studio. And we didn't have a studio, but we were able to make it work with a simple green screen and get the students involved to be running our announcements. And the thing that we're really proud of in a non-COVID year is that I can train the students. And once I've showed them how to use the TouchCast app, that's what we're using for announcements right now. They can train in the next news crew, because we like to cycle through, give the students more students an opportunity. They just train each other, and really it's very hands off, unless we're doing something, a special skit or something like that. And you had asked about what that looks like. Our dean of students kind of got roped into that. She one day decides to put something together, I think for our common language around the Simple Six, but she called it Tuesday Tips with Mrs. Hamill. And the kids loved it so much that it ended up being the following week. And now, if we don't have a Tuesday Tips with Mrs. Hamill, everybody wants to know where Tuesday Tips with Mrs. Hamill is. So it's every Tuesday that we have Tuesday Tips with Mrs. Hamill. And it could be, in a reminder of an upcoming event that we're having and what the expectations are for that, or make sure we're talking to our families about it. It could be playground expectations. It could be there's an upcoming tornado drill. So what does that look like? And so during the week, our dean of students, Kathy Hamill, as I said, she will be going around and asking students to help prepare for Tuesday Tips, because they love to be part of that. And so it's very student centered. They're always a part of those different skits and those teaching opportunities, and the kids love to be part of it. And it's just become a part of the culture.
It's funny. It creates that accountability, right? Because the kids know when you don't do something in the routine, once you change it, there's the demand.
And they know that Kathy will never forget to record it, but they also know that Mr. Hackett will sometimes forget to add it. And so they come straight to me if it's ever not there on a Tuesday. Mr. Hackett, where's Tuesday Tips? And so then I'm held accountable, very much so.
As the producer and editor.
Yes, exactly.
That is awesome. So now, as you're heading into, we've all had to experience COVID and school leadership. And I think we've all gained a few gray hairs, no matter our age, out of this. So now that most of us are back in person with our students here at school, and many of us have been for a long time, is as you enter into spring, we've got April and May. Most people's spring breaks are done. We are now into the home stretch. What things are you most looking forward to celebrating, to doing with your students and staff as you head into the final 8, 9, 10 weeks of school?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think just for me personally, I am really happy not to have every conversation revolving around COVID or restrictions, or I feel like we're getting slowly back to normal, where that's not every conversation we're having, because for a long time it was, and for a good reason. But everything that we were doing and planning revolved around around COVID and the pandemic. And so, I've got the itch to start writing on my blog again, and I'm excited to do that. I think the first one might be titled "Out of the Fog," because it really feels like we're starting to finally clear that fog and get to a good place. And one of the things that we're starting to do now more is have conversations about academics. Like I said before, it was so much of it was keeping kids distanced and keeping them safe. And that was important for that to be our goal. But now we're starting to see some of those gaps from times we were in hybrid or distance learning, or even last year when we all went home in March. And so I'm really looking forward to getting back up. We're starting a kind of a revamp of PLCs. If I can be really vulnerable for a second, when we first launched PLCs, it was a bit of a disaster, and I didn't lead our staff very well. And so PLCs became a bit of a swear word here. And one thing that we know is that collaborative teams are more effective, but we also know, the research would overwhelmingly say that a lot of that teachers don't necessarily enjoy PLC time, or they don't think it's effective. So we've got two pieces of research. And so I'm really excited about, it's called PLC 2.0. Cale Burke and Garth Larson put together a book and a set of tools that really make things individualized. It doesn't have to be the same conversation each time. The teams are allowed to pick different contexts, but they focus in on observable impact. And what we're doing in our collaborative teams, we are going to take that strategy, put it into use, and if it works, then we're going to document that learning, because as educators, we're really good at documenting student learning and really poor at documenting our own learning. So we're going to document that learning. We're going to find out what those observables are. And from those observables, we're going to make a difference in the classroom. And I'm really excited about relaunching, but as you know, from the first failure, it's going to take a while to get everybody on board. But we've practiced with a few tools already this spring. And one of them being, looking back into distance learning, finding out what are those tools and strategies that we use that can help us now that we're back in person, and documenting that to make sure that we don't lose it. Because I think it would be easy to look at distance learning and say, gosh, we don't want anything to do with what that was. We enjoy the kids being here in person, but just documenting and taking those things we've learned to get better.
It makes me think of when we meet as a team to talk about a student who might be struggling academically.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I've got Gabe here, and Gabe is really struggling with understanding the concepts of carrying and borrowing,
Yep.
Choose whatever it is. Okay. Well, we have an academic intervention we can do right now, and what we're going to do is we'll come back and talk about Gabe in 6 weeks. But these are the 3 things we want you to work on with him, and we want you to progress monitor. Right. What you're talking about is doing that similar to adults then. So you're rolling it out, giving the training, and then seeing, do we see the results happen from applying that intervention during PLC?
Yeah. Well, so it's, all of the tools they're able to work through them. And once you've done one tool, the other tools are similar, but you're taking different instructional strategies, or, you're asking the teams, what's the problem? Maybe it's engagement in second grade, but in third grade, it's differentiation. I don't want second grade focusing on differentiation if they feel like that's not an issue. So we're giving them the freedom. We're not saying, okay, here's your PLC agenda. I need you to talk through the same meeting every single time we meet. But the teams are allowed to, they have that freedom to pick the problem area, to put it on top of that tool, and then work their way through that tool together to come out with this impact plan that in the end says, we are going to work on this strategy by doing this. And at the end of the week, or the end of the 2 weeks, however long it is before we meet again, we're going to have documentation that says, when we do this in the classroom, this is how it impacts differentiation, or this is how it impacts student engagement. And we're going to record that. And it's really, really exciting.
Is it based on a book? Is it?
Yeah.
PLC 2.0 is the name of the book?
Yep. Garth Garth Larson and Cale Burke wrote it. Garth Larson is the co-founder of First Educational Resources, and they do several workshops, and that kind of thing. They actually came to Monticello, and that's how we kind of connected that way too. But it's powerful stuff. It's really changed our attitude towards PLCs and our collaborative time. And I think the biggest thing is it gives our teams the freedom to pick what they think is going to be most beneficial for the students by looking at what's not working in the classroom and how can they change that.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. Gabe, I know I asked you for a half hour, and here we are. We're already running into almost 45 minutes here. Yeah, that it goes by fast. Before we wrap things up, first of all, you're on Twitter. How can people find you on social media?
Yeah, I would say Twitter is the best way. I'm on Facebook, and mostly on Facebook because we have a school Facebook page. So that's really the reason that I have Facebook. So Twitter is the best way. And my handle is at LME_principal. So I probably stole your Twitter handle by using LME, but that's the best way to connect on Twitter. And then, of course, out there in a few other places where you could find me just by looking me up on the Monticello website.
That's awesome. Well, Gabe, thanks for being our first guest back here to the MESPA PrincipalCast. And I hope it wasn't too painful and that you enjoyed it.
It was an absolute pleasure, Brett. Thanks so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure for sure, Gabe. It's good to reconnect with you here. Everyone, make sure you keep your eyes out. We want to welcome Lisa Carlson, who is now our newest MESPA president. So we want to say congratulations to you, Lisa. Ashley Farrington, who's our new secretary, congratulations as well. And we just want to say, stay connected. You have your spring MESPA division meetings. Those are coming up here. Check in with your divisions. Make sure you just check in on your colleagues. And we hope that you enjoyed this episode, everyone. Thanks for listening.